Hey, this is Joy. Welcome back to another Whimsy Stamps video. Today I am sharing 5 must-know-how techniques for shadow stamping. You're going to ask me what that is. We're going to get into that. So my first tip for shadow stamping is to use a Misti or another platform so that your cardstock is lined up exactly, because you are going to stamp each image twice. My second tip is for red rubber stamps is to put that in the base of the Misti. Use some adhesive on your cardstock. Lay your cardstock on top of the stamp, uninked, and then close your Misti door so that you get perfect alignment. I ink that up with dye ink, the same as I did for the Bee's Knees stamp set earlier. And I stamped that twice. And the reason that we're doing that is that we are going to layer this and die cut. So my next tip would be to use a medium or an ink that is friendly with your medium. So for me, I am using Copics, so a dye ink would work. On the Fern, I am going to do ink blending. So there are some dye inks that are not compatible with each other. So if you were to stamp in black and then add ink immediately, you're going to smear your background. I used a dye ink, but I made sure that it was completely dry, and I even heat set that before I blended. But let's get back into the Bee's Knees. Like I said, chose the Copic color, the Bee's Knees flowers. I stamped that so it was in a diagonal. And the reason I left this in the video was because I know some of you like to see the coloring, and I chose really simple colors for any of you that are just starting out. So per my usual, for any type of foliage, I use a YG01, then I come in with a 6-7, blend that with the 1-7, blend that with the 0-3, and leave a 0-1 highlight. For the flower, I decided to use an RV, as in Victor, color combination, so I used a 2-9. And right around the cone and where any of the folds of the flower would be, I put the darkest color. And I did that for all 3 flowers. And then from there, I brought in an RV 2-5, and I extended those shadows. I didn't leave every bit of coloring in because it's redundant. And this is about how to create the shadows and the different layers. Once the 2-5 is done, I then come in with an RV 2-3, and I extend the color. So the RV 2-5 and 2-3 would be what we call the midtones, or the colors that our eye sees. The RV 2-9 is the shadow, which gives dimension, and then the RV 2-1 is the highlight. Like I mentioned, I stamped both images twice on 2 different pieces of cardstock, which is why the Misti was important. Here I am coloring the cone part, or the stamen. I typically go darkest to lightest, but here I started with the Y13, my lightest. Then I came in with my YR18, and then a Y19 and a Y28. And I just dotted that in to get the stippling effect of a cone flower. And I think it turned out pretty nicely. Now we're going to get into the fern. I colored that with the exact same colors as the foliage. And here's where I'm trying to decide my design. I'm using the A2 lattice die. And when I layer the fern on top of the white cardstock, it does not have enough dimension or a drama behind it. So we are going to fix that. First, we are taking a piece of 120-pound cardstock, and we are adhering it to the pieces that have been die cut. And I put that down with a pressure tool and then left the pressure on it while I inked up this background. So the next tip that I have is add contrast. So here I'm bringing in Memento ink in New Sprout and in Bamboo, and I am blending that onto the fern background that is not cut. So we're going to have a lot of green poking through the white, and this is how we're getting such dimension in this card. So use a Misti tool, use the right mediums, make sure that you're using multiple layers, either with foam tape or extra cardstock. In my case, I used 120 pound cardstock that I backed my lattice die with. Here I am lining up my flowers so they are exactly on top of each other. And this is how we're getting the shadow stamping. So we're getting the full effect of the flower, but it's on multi-levels of cardstock. Here's where I'm using the compression tool to make sure that I get this layer down, and I let that adhere nicely. I used Elmer's Craft Bond spray adhesive for that so that I don't have any glue or anything oozing out. Now for this one, I'm doing the exact same thing. Now this ink was still a little bit wet, so the Elmer's Craft Bond did not stick as well. Going back to the card, you're seeing that there's a border, and that's because the lattice A2 die cuts out a smaller panel. So I'm making sure to have the ferns lined up perfectly. And here I am pushing down nicely on this. I'm not getting great adherence, so I use my Misti and let that dry. Once it's dry, I come in with my gel pen to add a little bit of highlights throughout, just so that we brighten this up. If you are interested in any of the products, they are listed in the description box below. We would love it if you would like, comment, and consider subscribing. We love hanging out with you guys. For each of the cards, I adhere a piece of double-sided foam. I pop up the fern on white cardstock and the bee's knees on black. I then use black cardstock and I emboss that in white. So my next tip is use a lot of contrast and a lot of layers. So I pop up my sentiment. I also emboss it so that we're getting even more shadows on the card, so we're bringing out all of the different dimensions. Now, like I said, I like a lot of contrast, and when I looked at the fern card, there wasn't enough contrast. So I decide to emboss the sentiment from the seasonal trees onto that, and I just adhere that popped up across the front of the card. I do add confetti to my cards to add shimmer and shine, because I love all the shiny blingy things. That's completely up to you if you want to do that. Here is the final look at my two cards. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Until next time, keep crafting. I am sure I'll see you again. Have a great day. Bye-bye.